You ever been so sick you could barely lift your head only to have someone hand you a mop? Well, let me tell you about the time I got the flu and my daughter-in-law decided my rest was just an excuse to skip chores. But when I disappeared, their world turned upside down. Want to know what happened? Don't blink because you'll want to see this too. The very end. You know those days when your body feels like it's been run over by a truck? I'm talking about the kind of sick where even your eyelashes hurt, and you start to wonder if you'll ever feel human again. That was me sprawled out on the guest bed in my son's house, surrounded by a fortress of crumpled tissues and half-empty mugs of cold tea. My head was pounding, my nose was running like a faucet, and my bones etched in places I didn't even know I had bones. If there was ever a time I needed a little TLC, this was it. But as luck would have it, the universe had other plans. Just as I was drifting in and out of a feverish sleep, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, quick, sharp, and determined. The door swung open, and in marched my daughter-in-law, Sarah, wielding a mop like a sword. She didn't even bother with a "how are you" feeling or a sympathetic glance. Instead, she planted herself at the foot of the bed, hands on her hips, and said, "Stop pretending to be sick, can't you see the floor's dirty?" For a split second, I thought I must be hallucinating. Maybe the fever had finally cooked my brain, but no, there she was, glaring at me as if I'd committed some unspeakable crime by daring to get sick on her watch. I almost laughed if I'd had the energy. Instead, I just stared at her too, stunned to speak. Was she serious? Did she really think I was faking the flu, just to get out of mopping the floor? Before I could even process her words, my son David chimed in from the kitchen, his voice carried down the hallway, casual as you please, as if he were commenting on tea. Weather. Mom, stop using your age as an excuse. You eat and drink for free every day. Can't you do something? Excuse me. Did I just get called a freeloader in my own son's house? The same son I'd raised, fed, and clothed for 18 years and then some? The same son who used to cry for me in the middle of the night when he had a fever, and I'd sit by his bed wiping his forehead and whispering that everything would be all right. Now, here he was, acting like I was some kind of burden, just because I needed a few days to recover from the flu. I wanted to ask, "Would you like fries with that disrespect?" I wanted to remind him of all the times I'd put my own needs aside to take care of him, of the countless meals I'd cooked, the endless piles of laundry I'd folded, the birthday parties I'd planned, the scraped knees I'd bandaged. But instead, I just lay there, feeling a strange mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Was this really my life? Now? Was this what I'd signed up or when I agreed to move in and help out with the grandkids? Sarah was still standing there, tapping her foot impatiently, the mop handle clutched in, her hand like she was about to knight me, except instead of a sword, it was a cleaning tool, and instead of knighthood, I was being offered a guilt trip. "Well," she said, her voice sharp, enough to cut through my fever haze. "Are you going to help or not?" I looked at her, then at David, who had poked his head around the corner to see what the holdup was. For a moment I considered just closing my eyes and pretending to be asleep. Maybe if I ignored them long enough, they'd go away, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that some people just don't take a hint. So I did what I always do when I'm backed into a corner. I put on my best mom face and tried to keep my dignity intact. "All right," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll get up." Sarah fed and handed me the mop as if she just won some kind of battle. David disappeared back into the kitchen, probably to scroll through his phone or watch TV, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I sat up, slowly, every muscle protesting, and tried to steady myself. The room spun a little, but I gripped the edge of the bed and forced myself to stand. As I shuffled down the hallway, mop in hand, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten to this point. When had I become invisible? When had my years of hard work and sacrifice been reduced to a tally of meals eaten and chores left undone? I thought about my own mother, and how I'd always tried to make her feel welcome and appreciated, even when she was old and frail. Was it too much to ask for a little kindness in return? I started to mop the floor, my movement slow and shaky. Every swipe felt like a small act of defiance, a way of saying, I may be down, but I'm not out. But inside I was seethy. I knew I couldn't keep doing this, not for them, and certainly not for myself. Something had to change. And as I finished the last corner of the kitchen, I made a silent promise to myself. This was the last time I'd let anyone make me feel small in my own family. Little did they know, the real cleaning up was about to begin, and it wasn't just the floors that needed it. Now, let me ask you, have you ever reached a breaking point? I mean that moment when you're so fed up, so wrung out that you can almost hear a little voice inside you say, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. It's like a switch flips, and suddenly all the years of biting your tongue and swallowing your pride come bubbling up to the surface. That was me right then and there, standing in the kitchen with a mop in my hand and a fever still simmering in my bones. I looked around at the spotless floor, the empty living room, and the closed doors behind which my son and his wife were probably all read. I, asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I realized with a clarity I hadn't felt in years that I was done being taken for granted, done being treated like a living maid, done letting my own son and his wife talk to me like I was some kind of burden. I shuffled back to my room, every step feeling heavier than the last. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mop leaning against the wall like a silent witness to my humiliation. I stared at my suitcase in the corner, the same one I'd brought with me when I moved in to help out after the grandkids were born. I remembered how excited I'd been, thinking I'd be part of a big, happy family, sharing meals and laughter, watching the little ones grow up. But somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible. My help was expected, my presence barely acknowledged, and my needs, well, those didn't seem to matter at all. I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the house. I thought about Al, the years I'd spent putting everyone else first, my husband, my kids, my friends, even neighbors who needed a hand. I thought about the times I'd stayed up all night with a sick child or worked double shifts to pay for school clothes or skipped my own doctor's appointments because someone else needed me more, and now here I was, sick and exhausted, and the only thing anyone seemed to care about was whether the floor was clean. That's when the decision came to me, not in a flash, but in a slow, steady wave. I was going home, not just to my old house, but to myself, to the woman I used to be before. I let everyone else's needs drown out my own. I was scared, I won't lie. The thought of packing up and leaving in the middle of the night, of starting over at my age, was enough to make my heart race. Where would I go? Would I be okay? On my own? Would anyone even notice I was gone? But underneath the fear, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. The thrill of reclaiming my dignity, of standing up for myself, of maybe, just maybe, teaching my son and his wife a lesson they'd never forget. I waited until the house was silent. The only sound the soft ticking of the clock. In the hallway, I moved quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet and started packing. I didn't take much, just a few changes of clothes, my favorite sweater, the photo of my late husband that always made me feel brave, and a small box of keepsakes from the grandkids. I left behind the things that didn't matter, the things that could be replaced. What I was really taking with me was my self-respect. Before I left, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a note. I kept it short and simple, because sometimes the most powerful messages don't need a lot of words. Thanks for the hospitality. I'm going home. I placed it right in the center of the table where they couldn't miss it. I looked on the kitchen one last time, remembering all the meals I'd cooked, the birthday cakes I'd baked, the late night talks over cups of tea. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of relief. I was finally doing something. For myself, as I stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath and felt the weight of the past few years start to lift. The world looked different, quieter maybe, but also full of possibility. I walked down the driveway, my suitcase rolling behind me, and didn't look back. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was going home, not just to a place, but to a feeling, to the knowledge that I deserved better, that I was worth more than a clean floor or a hot meal, that I was still in so many ways the strong, capable woman I'd always been. I'll admit, as I waited for the early morning bus, I felt a flutter of nerves. Would I be lonely? Would I miss the grandkids? Would my son and his wife even care that I was gone? But then I remembered all the times I'd faced challenges before, all the times I'd picked myself up and kept going no matter what. I realized that I wasn't just leaving behind a house, I was leaving behind a version of myself that had forgotten how to say enough, and that more than anything made me feel alive. So there I was, suitcase in hand, heart pounding, ready to start a new chapter. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done pretending, I was done settling, I was going home. And this time I was bringing my dignity with me. The next morning dawned bright and early, but for the first time in a long time I wasn't there to see it. I imagined the sun crept through the kitchen window just like it always did, casting golden stripes across the floor. I'd mopped the night before, but there was no clatter of pans, no smell of fresh coffee, no gentle humming. As I set about making breakfast, the house, which usually buzzed with the quiet rhythm of my morning routine, was silent. I could picture it all in my mind, my son David stumbling out of bed, rubbing his eyes, expecting to find a hot cup of coffee waiting for him. Sarah, my daughter-in-law probably, wandered into the kitchen ready to complain about something or other, only to find the counters empty and the laundry basket still full. The kids, bless their hearts, would be looking for their favorite cereal, only to realize Grandma wasn't there to pour the milk or find the missing spoons. Instead, all they found was my note sitting right in the middle of the kitchen table. Thanks for the hospitality. I'm going home, short, sweet, and to the point. I could almost hear the confusion in their voices as they read it, the disbelief, turning slowly to panic as the reality of my absence began to sink in. For years, I'd been the invisible engine that kept their household running, meals cooked, clothes washed, floors swept, toys picked up, and 100 other little things that no one ever seemed to notice until they weren't done. Now, all at once, it was as if the gears had ground to a halt. I was sitting on the bus watching the world blur by outside the window when my phone started buzzing. First, it was a text from David. "Mom, where are you?" Then another, "Are you okay?" A few minutes later, Sarah chimed in, "Please come back, we're sorry." The messages kept coming one after another, each more frantic than the last. I could almost see them running around the house, opening doors, checking closets, calling my name. The woman who did nothing had suddenly become the one holding the whole house together. And now that I was gone, the cracks were starting to show. Isn't it funny how people only notice your worth when you're gone? I couldn't help but chuckle as I read their messages, a mix of apology and desperation. Maybe I should have left sooner. For I'd let myself believe that my efforts didn't matter, that I was just taking up space, eating their food, and getting in the way. But now, with just one simple act, walking out the door, I'd managed to turn their world upside down. It was almost comical in a way. I pictured David standing in the kitchen staring at the empty coffee pot like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Sarah probably trying to figure out how to work the washing machine, realizing for the first time just how much I'd done behind the scenes. I didn't respond to their messages right away. I wanted them to sit with their discomfort, to really feel the absence of all the little things they'd taken for granted. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't just a background character in their lives. I was the glue that held everything together. And if they couldn't appreciate that, then maybe they needed a little reminder. As the bus rolled on, I thought about all the times I'd put my own need. For the sake of my family, the early mornings, the late nights, the endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and caring. I thought about the times I'd bitten my tongue when Sarah made a snide comment or when David brushed off my advice like it was nothing. I thought about the loneliness I'd felt, even in a house full of people, and the quiet ache of being needed but never truly seen. And now, for the first time, I felt a sense of satisfaction, not spite, not anger, just a quiet, steady pride in myself for finally drawing a line. I spent the day settling into my old house, dusting off memories and making myself a cup of tea in my favorite mug. The place felt smaller than I remembered, but also warmer, cozier. It was mine, every inch of it, and I could do as I pleased. No one to boss me around, no one to take me for granted. I put on some music, opened the windows, and let the fresh air fill the rooms. For the first time in ages, I felt free. The calls kept coming. David left a voicemail, his voice shaky. "Mom, please, call me back. We're really sorry. We didn't realize how much you did for us." Sarah sent a long text full of apologies and promises to do better. Even the grandkids got in on the act, sending little voice messages. "Grandma, we miss you. Come home." I listened to them all, my heart softening a little with each one. I missed the kids, of course. I missed their laughter, their hugs, the way they'd curl up next to me with a book. But I didn't miss the feeling of being invisible, of being taken for granted. By evening, I finally called David back. I let him sweat a little, let him feel the weight of my absence. When he answered, his relief was palpable.
"Mom, I'm so sorry. We were wrong. We need you. Please come back."
I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "I know you need me, David, but I need to be respected too. I'm not just here to clean up after everyone. I'm your mother, not your maid." There was a long pause, and then he said, "I understand, Mom. I really do. We'll do better. Please just come home." I told him I'd think about it, and as I hung up the phone, I realized that sometimes the only way to make people see your worth is to step away and let them feel the emptiness you leave behind. Maybe I should have left sooner, but I was glad I'd finally found the courage to do it. A few days passed and I settled into the quiet comfort of my own home. It was strange at first, waking up to silence. Instead of the usual morning chaos, no, little feet thumping down the hallway, no clatter of dishes, no voices calling out for breakfast. I missed the grandkids, of course, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about them every time I passed their photos on my mantle. But there was a peace in the stillness, a sense of dignity I hadn't felt in years. I made my own coffee just the way I liked it, and sat by the window, watching the sun rise, feeling the warmth on my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. No one's maid, no one's afterthought, just me. It was on the third morning that I heard a knock at the door. I peeked through the window and saw David standing on the porch, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His hair was a mess, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. For a moment I almost didn't recognize him, my son, always so put together, now looking lost and a little boyish in his vulnerability. I opened the door and he stood there, shifting from foot to foot, holding a bouquet of slightly wilted flowers in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice soft and uncertain. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him in, watching. As he set the flowers and groceries on the kitchen table, he looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings. I could see the memories flickering across his face. He sat down, elbows on the table, and let out a long sigh. "Mom, we had no idea how much you did for us," he said, his voice cracking just a little. "The house is a mess. The kids miss you. Sarah and I, we've been fighting over the stupidest things. We didn't realize. Please come back." I looked at him, my heart aching. With a mix of love and frustration, I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the regret etched into every line of his face. For a moment I thought about all, the years I'd spent putting everyone else first, all the times I'd let myself be taken for granted. I thought about the exhaustion, the loneliness, the quiet ache of being needed but never truly seen. And then I thought about the past few days, the peace, the freedom, the simple joy of being myself. I smiled gently and reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. David, I'm happy to help. I love you and I love the kids, but I can't come back if I'm going to be treated like a maid. I'm your mother, not your housesick. Eeper. I want to be part of the family, not just the person who cleans up after everyone. He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I know, Mom. I'm so sorry. We took you for granted. I took you for granted. I promise things will be different. We'll help out more. We'll appreciate you. I just want you to come home. We sat there for a while holding hands, the silence between us filled with understanding. It wasn't just about the chores or the meals or the laundry. It was about respect, about being seen and valued for who I was, not just what I did. Sometimes you have to walk away to remind people of your value. Sometimes you have to put yourself first, even if it means breaking a few hearts along the way. After a while, David stood up and hugged me, holding on a little longer than usual. I hugged him back, feeling the weight of the past few days melt away. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen, not just as a mother or a grandmother, but as a person with needs and feelings of my own. We talked for a while longer, making plans for how things would be different. David promised to share the chores to make sure I had time for myself to treat me with the respect I deserved. He even offered to take a cooking class with Sarah, which made me laugh out loud. I could picture the two of them in the kitchen, fumbling with recipes and arguing over the best way to chop an onion. It was a start, a small step, toward a better, more balanced life. When David left, I watched him walk down the driveway, shoulders a little straighter, head held a little higher. I knew things wouldn't change overnight, but I also knew that I'd done the right thing. I'd stood up for myself, drawn a line in the sand, and reminded my family and myself of my worth. That evening, I called Sarah and the grandkids. We talked and laughed, and the kids begged me to come home. I told them I'd be back soon, but things would be different this me. I'd help, of course, I always would, but I'd also make time for myself, for my friends, for the things that made me happy. I'd learned my lesson, and I hoped they had too. Sometimes it takes a little distance to see things clearly. Sometimes you have to walk away to remind people and yourself of your value. And sometimes the greatest lesson you can teach your family is that love isn't about sacrifice. It's about respect, appreciation, and the courage to stand up for yourself. As I sat by the window that night watching the stars twinkle in the sky, I felt a deep sense of peace. I knew I was loved. I knew I was valued, and most importantly, I knew I was finally home in every sense of the word. So, if you've ever felt invisible or underappreciated, remember, you're not alone and you're worth more than you know. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real life tales, laughs, and a little wisdom from someone who's been there, done that, and still has the mop to prove it.